Hello everybody and welcome to the latest Manufacturing Management Live panel. My name is Chris Beck. I'm the editor of Manufacturing Management magazine. As the nation wakes up from lockdown and begins to open up again, and we're speaking a day after the business secretary announced, for example, that non-essential retail can reopen again from Monday the 16th of June, manufacturers find themselves in an unprecedented situation. Many, of course, have been operational in some capacity during lockdown, but many others are coming back to work and finding that life on the factory floor isn't as they left it. Workplaces are changing, and social distancing and PPE are now a requirement for any company that wants to restart operations and open up again. And this has urged manufacturers to have a rethink of the way that their shop floors and I suppose their back offices as well operate to meet ever-changing regulations and guidance. Keeping workers safe has always been a primary consideration for manufacturers, as with all businesses, but now there's additional elements to pay attention to. The government has issued a set of guidelines to ensure safe working, but many business owners and managers are concerned about how these can be met and measures that they need to put in place to comply and fully protect their people. To look at this today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Anne Hayes, Director of Sectors at BSI, Brian Laurie, Head of Sales and Marketing at Arco, and Chris Newson, HSS Head of Learning at Make UK, the manufacturers organisation. Now, Anne, a couple of weeks ago, BSI launched version 1 of its Back to Work guidance, a 20-odd page document that outlined the steps companies in all sectors should be taking to make their workplaces safe to return. There's an updated version due in a couple of weeks, at the end of June, I think. But are there steps that companies should be looking at now to ensure a safe return to work as and when they're allowed to do so?
Well, thanks, Chris, and thanks for the opportunity to come and talk to you all here today. I think the first thing I just want to say is that these are, as you said, unprecedented times, and so the learning that's happening is rapid, is forever changing, and the key is to build on the experience that either you yourselves get or that we can get from other people. And very much where we came from with this piece of work we did here was to start from the basic principle that economic recovery is crucial, but the fundamental principle behind economic recovery is protecting your workers and your people that come in and support your business. So it's very much come from that perspective around safe working for people in their place of work, and that place of work could be in a manufacturing environment, but it could equally be where they have to go into someone's home. So this is quite a generic guidance, that's the first thing to say, and what we're keen to do is to build on the experience that everybody has, and that's why we're taking through this somewhat unusual process for a standard, and we're not calling it a standard because it's a guidance document, but for something out of BSI, is because actually we are issuing it as versions, and then we are updating it as that learning and experience happens, because let's be honest, we're all going through this for the first time. So just to answer your specific question, is really actually the best thing that people can be doing now, if they're not already back in their workplace, is to really start to look at what they need to plan for. And that's from sort of the type of work that happens and how that work is organized, to where it takes place, to the interaction that needs to happen between people, be they co-workers or the public, the use of common areas, the use of shared equipment, and sort of really one of the things that probably we're all becoming more familiar with dealing with is sort of the impact of the pandemic on workers in terms of their physical health, but also their mental well-being. You know, some people have been stuck at home for quite a long time. They've either been furloughed or they've been working from home. They may have felt quite isolated, and other people haven't. And so you've got this sort of clash of situations that are happening. I think as a starting point, those are the things that I would say people need to really start to think about.
Yeah, mental health is a topic that we're going to be picking up later in this conversation. Actually, I think it's a really important one that we can spend a bit of time on. Chris, obviously, Make UK represent the manufacturing sector as a whole, and as I said at the start, there's been some manufacturers that have operated throughout, whether that's doing normal operations or pivoting to make ventilator parts, PPE, whatever. But quite a lot are now coming back. I know Nissan, for example, opened up earlier in the week. and other big manufacturers are now getting back to some semblance of normality. What's obviously you've got an ear to the ground at Make UK. What's the general feeling amongst industry? Are companies finding it relatively easy, or are they struggling in some cases?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, Chris, because I think the general perception, I feel like, if you're outside of manufacturing, is that, if you like, everyone's been working from home, or the sites haven't been open. And what we're finding from our membership is that that's not the case at all. Now, I know this is a very small sample size, but we ran a webinar a couple of weeks ago for our membership. 317 people on the call, different companies, and 87% of those companies had not closed down and had worked through in some way. They'd still got sites that were open. So I think that's really interesting. So that's one thing that our membership is telling us. The other one is that I think our membership is telling us that the guidance from government, and backed up by the sort of thing that BSI are putting out at the moment, the guidance is relatively clear. It hinges on you doing a risk assessment and then working through a hierarchy of controls. And for us, and certainly what we're telling our membership, is that this hierarchy of controls hasn't really changed at all. And we need to consider the current pandemic as we do with any other hazard. What are the likely ways in which it can happen, and what are the controls we need to put in place? So that's what we're advising our members on, in terms of working through a hierarchy, starting off with not having people at work that are either in vulnerable groups, or are in vulnerable groups either because of their existing medical condition or because they have contracted the virus. So it's that very top level. There's then things as we work through, like social distancing, and of course PPE fits into that and is very important. I think the other thing, and I don't know if we'll touch on this later, but the other thing, and really I think the biggest thing that we're hearing, is around confidence. And I feel like, and Make UK feel like, a lot of the questions that are generated from employees who are concerned about returning to work are because of a lack of awareness or appreciation of the basics around the virus. How does it transmit? What does it do? What have I really got to be worried about? And it leads to a lot of questions that, if you know the answer to that, aren't really questions. And so we've been doing a lot of work with our membership to try and bring out what we're calling a culture of confidence, and so people feel comfortable to return to work.
That's again, yeah, that is an interesting point, and one we'll look at. But I just want to bring Brian in here on something actually that Chris mentioned there, PPE, and PPE, or a lack thereof, a relative lack thereof, has been making headlines across the world, not least in hospitals and care homes here in the UK. And I know that ARCO has been at the forefront of helping to kind of meet the demand. And I think a few weeks ago you sourced 140 million face masks, which are now being sent out from your facility in Hull. Obviously, that's an amazing achievement. PPE as a concept isn't anything new to most manufacturers. You walk around a manufacturing site, and at the very least there'll be high vis, eye protection, ear protection, but it's now even more of a requirement. And how important is it for companies to know that the equipment that they're sourcing is the right stuff to be wearing, but also that it meets the standards necessary to keep the disease at bay?
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity to engage in this conversation. I mean, I think it's a really pertinent question. I mean, I've been in this industry now for 30 years, and the issue of counterfeit, fake, non-compliant product has never been more profound. The market right now is literally awash with product that doesn't do what it says in the tin, which causes us, some huge concern actually. We're one of very few businesses with an accredited lab as part of our proposition, and we've tested literally hundreds of products in recent weeks, and many instances we're discovering non-compliant products. So huge concern, I think, for the here and now. And actually, I think the legacy of that is a huge concern. Many businesses have seen PPE and the media hype around PPE and have jumped on a bandwagon of range extension to include selling PPE without the knowledge and expertise to do that and do it well and do it compliantly and put in the right quality assurance processes that those in manufacturing know all about. And that does cause us huge concern. I think, like BSI, we've spent a lot of time on sharing our knowledge, sharing our expertise. We've got a number of, as we call them, expert guides, free and available online, that cover many topics. How to conduct a great risk assessment linked to COVID-19. Basics around hygiene, hand washing, how to spot non-compliant product. So we, as a business that is there to keep people safe at work, our challenge has never been more profound and real. And I think it's been a real battle actually to maintain continuity of supply to existing customers, like many in the manufacturing sector who still have risks and hazards through their processes, and to stay in operation, as Chris highlights, many have. They've still needed PPE on a BAU basis. So we've had to protect BAU supply, and then we've taken a view of we will then supply any incremental product we've managed to source linked to societal need. So we've prioritised frontline healthcare and support industries. So, critical industries like the food and utilities. So we've taken pretty tough decisions actually about who we will and will not supply, but we've at a time when demand's outstripped supply, we've taken some tough decisions not to profiteer, not to take any business if it then jeopardises that business continuity, which is critical to all.
This is a kind of question for everyone really, just following up on what Brian and Chris have said, especially Chris, the confidence aspect of it. If you're an employee, you want to be confident that your employer has done everything they can to keep you safe, and whether that's educating you more about the effects of the virus and why you have to stand a certain distance or not touch certain things, or the confidence that the PPE that you're being supplied is up to scratch. How important is, from a kind of management point of view, the kind of people who'd be watching this video, how important is it for them to instill that culture of confidence and kind of get the message out that that it is, they have made things as safe as they possibly can to return to work? I don't know which one of you wants to pick that up first.
Well, I don't mind diving in there. I mean, it's hugely important, and what we say in our guidance and what the feedback we're getting from really every sector that we are involved with is around communication with your people. It's about making sure you understand what they need if they're going to carry on working at home. If they're coming into a workplace, it's around briefing them before they get into the workplace so they know what to expect, and then ensuring that you are constantly updating and reviewing that information. I don't think we can communicate enough at the moment. I think it's really hard. I think it's one of the huge changes that have happened through this experience. One is people have shown that how adaptable we are, because we have had to adapt, and we are adapting, and Chris was talking about sort of industries that have kept going and that have pivoted and done got involved in ventilators or whatever else they've got involved in, but actually all of that is done because people are being taught to and are aware of what's happening. And that's one of the things that we should build on for the future. And I think communication is just incredibly important. For me, that's really pretty well one of the most important things we can do. I also think we need to be realistic. And, you know, the government guidance says this, we say this, I think in all the guidance it says this, is that we, you know, you don't ask people to come back to work if they don't need to be back at work. You know, if they can work from home, let them work at home. You know, minimize the numbers that you need back into your organizations for an appropriate amount of time. And obviously that comes down to risk assessment and assessing what you need to do, but it is about being realistic and not thinking, great, let's get everyone back. You know, we need to do this in a phased approach. And it's very difficult when you see lockdown being released and you see people out walking and people doing everything that they're doing to say, well, actually, why isn't my business going back? I mean, I'm feeling this. I keep thinking, well, maybe I should go to the office, but our office is no, I don't need to go to my office. So it is a very real issue, and it's providing people with that reassurance that you're not going to call them back, or that they're okay if they're not called back. It's a mixture of things.
Yeah. So,
on you go.
Sorry, Brian. Okay, thanks. So, yeah, I mean, just you know, agreeing with what was said there, just broadening it out a bit. And I talked about the culture of confidence, not to go through that whole model, but it starts with, I think, we've all talked about risk assessments here, but it starts with having someone in the organisation that I would suggest has read a guide, whether it's the government guide or from BSI or hopefully both. You know, they've read something which gives them a good steer, and it is good guidance. You know, so it sort of points in the right direction. They then need to have the competence to turn that into a risk assessment. Nothing's changed there. No one is going to do a risk assessment for, well, it's the business's legal responsibility to do the risk assessment. So that needs to be in place. That's not new or not changed. That's got to happen. But the real confidence bit is around awareness and education. Something which we found really, our members have found really helpful. We've developed an e-learning package, which is just aimed at getting employees awareness about what the virus is up. How does it work? Because these maybe are conversations we're not having. So what I'm saying is, we're saying keep 2 meters apart. We're saying have a Perspex shield in front of you if you can't do that. But why? You know, so what we've tried to do in this space is to educate people, not to turn them into medical experts, obviously, but you know, show them how the virus works, how it transmits. Because I think if you understand that, then you understand A, how important the controls are, and B, you don't start worrying about other controls that aren't really required. So that's the awareness part. And I think whereas before I said 87% of companies we know have carried on working, of course, that's on a limited basis. A lot of their employees aren't at work. So I think what I'm talking about there in terms of awareness is important, yes, to get out to people that are at work, but you know, in order to encourage people to come back, you also need to educate them in that way. So that's the 2 bits I would add.
Yeah, I guess just a small build from me. I think generally there's really good intent to comply. So I think given the level of awareness of, you know, the pandemic and actually the importance of social distancing, I think generally colleagues in every sector and every industry are intent to comply and do the right thing. I think one of the challenges for us is, you know, by nature, barring a few exceptions, we're typically quite social beasts, and therefore we revert to type. You know, we revert to being tactile at times. And I think one of the key things that we can do here is, you know, to build on that education piece, is have really clear and obvious and visible signs, literally, to remind people of that need. Because, you know, best will in the world, people will revert to their innate behaviour. And I think we've just got to keep, you know, literally holding signs up in front of people, flagging social distancing at all times. And, you know, and that can be in many manufacturing environments I've been in. You know, at the start of every shift, there's briefings and so on and so forth. You know, those will still take place with social distancing, but, you know, the responsibility for line management, supervisors, is just to reiterate that message. be at the start of every day. It's just so important that that lands, and we continue to drumbeat that message and not become complacent. I think that's a real risk for us right now.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that kind of it's a like you say, Brian, a cultural shift as much as anything else, and complete behavioural change away from the old way of doing things, where you could go and sit next to your mate at lunchtime and have a chat or share a pack of sweets or something. And for the time being, we're going to have to stop doing that. And I guess that kind of leads on. And I know something you mentioned right at the beginning was around mental health, and it's been a strange time for everyone, whether you're working from home, you're still going into work, whether you're furloughed, and going back into what will be a drastically different workplace will only exacerbate that. And I guess how can management teams, how can companies in general manage that reintegration of the workforce back into the new way of working things, and be mindful of mental health aspects?
Well, I think I really like what Chris has been saying about the e-learning and the education piece, because I think that is crucial for everyone to understand, what's going on and why certain things have happened. And actually, Brian mentioned about sort of actually having signs up that explain to people what's going on and what action they need to take. I think all of these things provide reassurance, and to some extent, I think it's a question of, why are people losing confidence? Is it because they've been on their own for a long while, or is it because they're concerned about whether they've got a job, or is it because actually they're just scared about how they're going to get to work? I mean, I'm based in London, so for me and my teams, it's a lot of the conversations we've been having about, well, I don't really want to use the tube, but I live an hour and a half away by tube, let alone if I try and come by car or bus or walk or cycle. So I think there's many things that will cause anxiety, and if anxiety isn't spoken about early, it grows into something that's a lot more a lot more serious and difficult to deal with. So I think there's a lot of talking, to be honest, that has to happen. There's a lot of communication that has to happen. I think if you have carried on working, you haven't been furloughed, you've probably had endless one-to-ones with people in your teams, or either who work directly for you or you work for, and actually that has to happen, because we all have to understand at a different level what everybody's going through at the moment. And I don't know that that's something we've always been very effective at or very good at. And I think that's a big change in management style and management experience that we're all going through and we all have to learn. I think those would be my main comments on that. I don't know if the others want to come in.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, there's something about, we can't approach this with a sort of cookie cutter management style. That this has to be a very tailored and almost individual approach. And I it's another call. even within our world right now, I've seen different people in the Arco business responding very differently. Actually, some appearing to revel in the working from home, the ability to use technology to engage, and some really struggling with it. And I think what as responsible employers we've got to do is look at how we can best respond to individual needs and create, albeit safe ways of working, but safe ways of working that aren't just safe, they're also supporting and helping from a mental well-being perspective.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, to kind of pick up on that, the manufacturing sector by its very nature is male dominated. It can be, at least traditionally, quite macho. They opening up and talking about your mental health, I know it's something that Make UK have been trying to encourage, and kind of the softer health and safety skills are not necessarily something that manufacturers are particularly traditionally been good at. Do you think that that's something that's going to change going forward, or has to change, I suppose?
Yeah. Well, I think both. Yeah, I think it has to change, and I think it is going to change, and is in some cases it is changing right now. you know, one of the first points that was mentioned there was about communication. And what we're finding, and we all know, I think, if you look at, you know, the management standards that are out there, 45,001, for example, okay, you know, it talks about in there, very crystal clear, about the very top level of your organization regularly communicating on health and safety with employees. And we're finding, and I don't think it's a surprise to anyone, and this isn't recently, this is since 45,001 and the migration came out, we're finding that companies aren't very good at that in general. There's some great examples, but there are a lot that aren't very good at it. And you know, no time, perhaps in history, has it been more important to do that communication. So I think the other thing that we're learning as well with that is we don't all need to go somewhere and be in a big room and have a sort of seminar. You know, we internally at Make UK, our CEO gives a regular communication to all staff members via you know, this sort of forum on a weekly basis, and I just think that's really important. And I hope, I know in our company, but I hope generally that won't stop when everything comes back to normal. You know, it's got to carry on because it's very effective. So I think, you know, and it's already been mentioned, this communication piece is really important around everyone's well-being. And like you said at the beginning there, the manufacturing sector traditionally has been a sort of, you know, use the word you said, macho industry. But I think before this crisis that we're in now, that's changing, and it's changing at a good speed, I think. It's really interesting, actually, if you look at our safety diploma, which we run, the sort of proportion of male, female there, over the last 2 years, I would say, has been about 70% female, 30% male. So, and that's a very small snapshot of a piece of information, but I think that's showing things are changing as we go along. And it's still a macho industry, I wouldn't disagree, but yeah, you know, we need to be thinking about well-being more, and we are. You know, we're seeing our courses that are around well-being as some of our best-selling courses at the moment. So, you know, no surprise, perhaps.
Yeah, good.
Can I just pick up on one thing? Sorry, Chris, but I just think
Yeah.
it's something that Brian made me think, is that really is about how people going through this time, because it's quite an extended time that we've all been in this situation, and it's not going to go away quickly. It's going to be quite a while before we're back to anything where people are saying they're fully functioning again. And I think you might be fine 1 week, but you might not be fine 2 weeks later. And I think it's not okay to check in with people once and say, great, you're okay, good on you, mate. It's a bit more around back week after week and saying a slightly different maybe, but just, you know, that you are thinking about things, and that I know myself, you know, I've gone up and down through this cycle, and I'm sure everybody else has.
Absolutely, yeah. And that kind of, it's obviously, like you just alluded to there, Anne, it's a very rapidly evolving situation even now, 11 or 12 weeks into lockdown, and the regulations are always changing. What you can and can't do is always changing. What PPE you should be wearing is always changing. And I mean, for you at BSI, normally developing a standard, developing guidance is quite a long, drawn-out process, and you've had to really react quickly. Like I said, version 2 of your guidance is coming out in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
How do companies stay on top of?
Well, it's a huge challenge. Yeah, it's a huge challenge. But actually, it's been great for us in that we've learned to do something fast. It might not have gone through a full consensus process, which is what we're known for, but actually we're in a situation where people needed information out, and the fact that we can get information out in a format that people are familiar with, i.e. plan, do, check, act, so it fits with other management systems and things. It's not got anything like certification or anything else. It's just there for guidance. And what we are doing is really rethinking how we develop this sort of thing. We're really keen that this should develop with experience. So as people learn and go through this, it's no good us getting that experience out in 18 months' time. We need to get it out now. So which is why we're encouraging people to comment, tell us what they're doing, tell us what's worked and what hasn't worked, so we can alter it. And then we will commit that we are getting it out again in the beginning of July, and then we will revise it again, and we will keep revising it until it's not needed anymore, because we just feel that it's a really good way of capturing multiple sectors experience that could be useful to anyone, and it is freely available on our website, and we very much hope that people will use it. You can use each version as it goes along, but it will develop, and it will constantly develop. So yeah, really keen that people feed back to us on what they've learned.
When I just to build on that, I think the one of the positives that I think that's come from this, pretty dire situation is the ability for many businesses to work in a more agile way. And I think, I hope that that's an enduring tenet of how business is done across multiple sectors, because I think it's eminently more efficient, and we're able to adapt, move, adjust and pivot, and I think it's been really powerful to see. And I think one of the, back on the kind of ever-changing landscape in terms of legislation, etc., I think one of the things that businesses like ARCO, I think organisations like BSI, we've got a key role to do is to simplify the complex. And I think one of the things that, similar to BSI, all of our content's online, and that's all around taking what could be construed as complex insight that is confusing to the recipient and just putting it into normal speak and clearly calling out what is required, so making it action orientated rather than legalese. So key role for expert organisations.
Chris, have you got?
Yeah, and well, just quickly to pick up on, I think something that Brian and both alluded to really, and that is that things have changed at an amazing pace. Anne's talking about how long it usually takes to produce a BSI standard, and I think our example, if you like, of that is that the whole of our health and safety training catalogue, if you like, was face-to-face training, and in one instant that switched off, and we can't do it anymore. We can't support organisations, whatever it might be, risk assessment training, I don't know, but we can't support them at all. And much like both examples so far, we made that change to virtual classrooms in about 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe. We've got most of our training catalogue available, not via e-learning, and not by something you can just read, but an actual interactive session with a trainer. And our membership, I think, has found that really useful. And the bit I think we can take positively from that, and is not just doing training that way, that's a good idea, but just, can we move at a more quicker and more agile way? Do we need all these things in place? And sometimes we do, okay, but I think we need to look at our processes again and say, let's take the positive stuff we've learned and how fast we can move, and keep doing that even after the crisis.
And one kind of final question, time is beginning to run out, so if I give you all just a quick 30 seconds to a minute or so, just to kind of say, what is the one thing, the one legacy that you would like this pandemic, this crisis, to have on not just the manufacturing sector, but the way we work as a country and kind of as a world? We've spoken about agility, better communication, more awareness of things like mental health and the kind of well-being of the people who work for and with you. But is there one thing that you'd like to see employers adopt, or just society in general kind of move towards? Anne, I don't know if we'll start with you.
Well, I think that's a good idea and a bad idea. So I think what I think I would really say agility, because I pick up on that point really, because we have changed how we've done things, as Chris said, in a matter of weeks, and we're able to get expertise out to people very quickly, and that's what we want to do, and we want to enable industry to succeed, and we want to enable the UK to succeed. So doing this and reaching out to people like we are here, using things like this to reach out to people, just makes such a difference to how we operate. And I would absolutely, you know, echo the thoughts. I can't remember if it was Brian or Chris now, that we don't go backwards on that, that we move forward.
Chris, what about you?
Yeah, I'd just very quickly add to that I think one of the things we can learn from, as well as what Anne said, is the consultation bit. If I'm talking about employers and employees, you know, we need to carry this talking together on. It's really surprising to me, but it is real feedback we've had from a lot of our members that, you know, it says in the BEIS guidance that we must share our risk assessment with our employees, and we must share it on the website. And we've had a lot of kickback from that. You know, why have we got to share it? Well, the reason you've got to share it is you've got to collaborate together, and you know, you end up with a better product if you're both working on it together. And there shouldn't be any fear factor in sharing it. So I hope we can learn from that and collaborate more effectively internally in an organisation.
Absolutely, yeah. And Brian?
I would agree with both of the previous comments. I guess my build would be probably wrapped around preparedness. So I think we've confronted pandemics in the past. We've had some serious health issues in the past, like SARS, MERS, Ebola, not necessarily in this country, but across the globe. And actually, we could have learned more from those experiences and have been better prepared as a country, and as companies, actually, to respond to this. And I think a legacy for me should be that businesses and governments should, you know, absolutely embrace and not just have, you know, DR plans as a tick box. They should be serious parts of how we run a business, and we should effectively review them regularly, engage with them, and ensure that there's firm actions that sit behind those plans.
Yeah, I think all three of you there have made excellent points. There's a lot of positive that can come out of what has been a real shock. And you know, 6 months ago, who'd have thought that we'd be sat like this, having been at home for 3.5 months? It's, you know, it is an unprecedented time. It's the word that keeps getting thrown around, but for good reason. I think it's going to drastically alter the way that people work and think about how they're working. And you know, it's imperative for managers and for the leadership teams, whatever industry you're in, to keep on top of the guidance and make sure, first and foremost, I suppose, that your people are safe and confident with returning to work. We are unfortunately rapidly running out of time, so I'm going to have to wrap up. Thank you again to Anne, Chris, and Brian for your time today. Thank you, those at home, for watching, and stay safe. And I'll see you on the next panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.